This is a download from BFM 89.9, the business station.
Good afternoon. It's time for Tech Talk. This is Frida Liu. Detecting a threat does little good if the target company is not ready to respond. And here with me to help us respond is Krishna Rajagopal, the CEO of AKATI Consulting. Welcome back. Now, why is it difficult for companies to determine what the impact may be and how to mitigate the problem?
Well, Frida, when a company detects a possible threat or a vulnerability, be it IT or non-IT, right? Trying to find out what the impact is and how to mitigate the threat is not so easy in today's complex infrastructure. See, in a simple environment, let's say you've got 5 or 6 computers, that's quite straightforward. But in a complex enterprise environment with thousands of computers, hundreds of network security controls, you've got your routers, your access control lists, your firewalls, your IPS, then it becomes a little bit more complex. And that is the crust of the issue that most companies face today.
Okay, they don't know whether it's going to be very major or how major it can be.
And where it happened.
So where is the loophole?
Yes.
Okay, so what are some of the common threats that businesses face and don't have a solution?
Well, surprisingly, a lot of companies can't answer one of the most basic questions, which is, what kind of access is actually allowed in my network? This is a simple question that a lot of companies can't actually answer, right? For example, we actually had a real situation where we went into a client's office for an investigation.
Not in this country.
No, not in this country. But then, when we went in, we asked them, do you have a firewall? And they were very proud. They said, yes, we do. We have a checkpoint and stuff like that. And when I went in to investigate the firewall, we saw a lot of rules. Quite impressive, all the different rules to protect different things. But right at the top, the most recent rule was allow any to any. In other words, they don't have a firewall.
Oh.
That means they've just opened up everything to everyone.
Okay.
So I spent the next 2 minutes trying to wonder what actually happened here,
So it's like if you've got a fortress, but you left the door open.
You left the door open. You got a very impressive fortress and you left the door open, And then I probably wondered. I probably wondered, it could have been done by a vendor, could have been done by the previous IT guy, and someone else came in, and probably, this guy doesn't know what he's doing, and some of the users might have complained, hey, I can't access this, I can't access this. He might have Googled, and in some forum, somebody would have said that, hey, allow any to any, and that's probably what he did. And he's just opened his organization straight away.
So when you asked that question, what was the answer?
When I asked the question, most of them were stunned and didn't actually have an answer for that, And so the whole idea of, does a bad actor actually pose a threat to your organization, is a very difficult question to answer for most organizations.
Okay, so companies are becoming more reliant on intelligence response systems to automate responses, which cuts down on the time response. Now, is this a solution?
Well, we see it as an emerging trend at the moment, You have vendors that have risk analysis integrated with their firewall system, for example, that allows their software to gauge the impact of certain firewall rules before you actually roll out the rule. Some vendors create what we call as a dynamic adaptive defense that sort of can be programmed with possible actions that you can take when you find an incident. But the idea behind these new solutions is that you can't deal with real-time attacks unless you are responding in real time. Now, we've got a very simple 4-step process for this. If you want to deal with this kind of issues, it's very important to go back to basics. And the simple rule is, number 1, carry out an assessment. Know your threats, both your IT and non-IT. Maybe even for the IT portion, maybe your networks, application, infrastructure. For the non-IT, maybe even damage assessment, KNR, kidnap and ransom, maybe. And by doing a thorough security assessment, then your next step is to know your current security posture. And this is where you guide yourself by knowing what are the threats, what is allowed, and what is doable. Then you protect yourself. You implement those mitigation strategies that you've discovered, yeah? And usually these strategies are stipulated in your threat assessment report when you carry out one. And of course, the fourth step is to keep repeating this.
Okay, all right. And you were saying, what's KNR?
Yep. I know it's a little strange in this country, but it's, it's getting popular. Yeah.
Okay.
We do carry out this services sometimes, especially in
It's called what?
kidnap and ransom.
Kidnap ransom.
Yeah, so we carry out an assessment to see the possibilities, and also even perhaps maybe even we work with certain insurance organizations to even insure you.
Okay, so what happens? It's physical.
Yeah.
Oh, physical. Okay, I thought this was an IT terminology.
No.
Physical kidnap and
People
ransom.
haven't gone into
I
kidnapping firewalls yet.
Okay, so you've just outlined the steps, right?
Yes.
Okay, how do you make sure you have the right systems in place?
Well, when it comes to at AKATI Consulting, when we propose or meet a client, we have a methodology that we usually tell the client, which is basically threes. They're broken up to three parts, which is assess, then you guide, and you protect. It's very simple, right? Of course, the four steps that I mentioned earlier is also critical. Now, one thing is to find out what kind of defensive tools you have in place to help you mitigate the problem before you even start. And of course, you can get internal help, external consultants, whatever you want. Now, the reason for this is, for example, if you don't have a firewall, you don't have a web application firewall, you don't have an intrusion prevention system, you don't have an endpoint. Now, you may be able to detect an attack, but you can't do anything about it, right? So that's why the basic fundamental infrastructure is very important. And again, when you are, let's just say you have a security information and event management, SIEM, that's a very common trend now. Let's say your SIEM system pieces together a sign of an attack. Now, that's when another portion of this puzzle comes in, which is you need to have the expertise to carry out an investigation and to craft a defense. And this expertise should be on standby.
Okay.
If you don't have that, again, you're back to square one. You may know that you're under attack, but what do you do? Right? So
You left the front door open.
Yes. And of course, last but not least, of course, when you say expertise, then that brings me to the education part of it. Education. That's very important. Right. In fact, we actually acknowledge this fact, and we are actually having a workshop next month. It's an international workshop. It's a revised workshop of our previous workshops, and we call it CSI, Computer Systems Investigation.
All right.
Yeah.
I'm here with Krishna Rajagopal, the CEO of AKATI Consulting, discussing automation response. And in just a moment, we'll get to the juicy stuff. We'll talk about example gone wrong. Tech Talk, BFM 89.9. Good afternoon. This is Tech Talk. Frida Liu here. Krishna Rajagopal, the CEO of AKATI Consulting. We're discussing about cutting the lag between action and detection when it comes to security in the office right now. There's an old saying in IT, you can't manage what you can't measure. If that's true, security managers must be in a world of hurt now.
Oh, yes, they are, Frida. It reminds me of the old game, wasn't it? The World of Hurt. Now, sometimes it's not so bad, though, Frida, because you could always blame it on God.
Yeah.
Or you can blame it on luck. But when you can't, then you need to have proper defensive technology, right? And when you are measuring, this is important. Sometimes we tend to get the wrong people to do the job. For example, a lot of these rules require what we call as regular expressions. And if your expert does not eat, live, and breathe regular expressions, then it's going to be difficult for them to craft a rule.
Regular expressions?
Yes, that's the sort of expressions that we use for creating all these rules. And again, sometimes people carry out metrics or measurements on the wrong metrics. For example, they measure aspects of security using things that are not really meaningful to the business. I'll give you an example. They're tracking number of vulnerabilities. They're tracking days that they take to patch, or their antivirus performance. Now, these can be useful at an operational level, but in security, it's pretty much like you're lying to yourself. The real measure of security, or rather success in security, is starting from nothing bad has actually happened, from that clean state, right? Having some incidents, more incidents, most incidents.
Okay. All right. We'll talk about automation. Are there examples of automation gone wrong?
Well, there are. Nowadays, the trend is automation. But you remember, when a security solution is completely automated, a lot of damage can actually be done before you even realize something has happened. Give you an example. Some time back, there was this organization called WebSense, and they actually use a cloud-based threat system, pretty much like how Checkpoint has done their threat cloud recently. And how it works is when one customer picks up a threat, that information gets sent to the vendor's cloud, and that gets shared across all their customers. Now, sort of a community threat-based system. Now, in this particular case, WebSend accidentally, falsely identified Cisco and everything to do with Cisco as a hacking site. So nobody could access Cisco or anything to do with Cisco for a good couple of days, right? So that's an example of automation done wrong.
Okay. I guess the question that should be asked these days is not if I get hacked, but when I get hacked.
Yes.
What do I do?
Well, before you even get hacked or before you hit an incident, make sure you have the basics covered, right? I'm talking about log management. Make sure you have proper log management in place. Maybe even a SIEM solution. And of course, your basic perimeter security, your firewalls, your IPS, your antivirus. Now, with regards to logs, a lot of people are confused. To log or not to log, that is the question, yeah? If you're in doubt, my simple rule is just collect it. If you're not sure whether you should log it or not, log it, right? Essentially, you would want to collect more data and review less of it.
Yeah.
That's the magic trick, right? And when you hit an incident, if you do not have in-house people who are properly trained, then call a forensic investigator, right? He or she should be able to guide you on the proper steps. If you have in-house people, get them to do the first level of investigation.
Okay. What are some of the security applications that is a must-have for businesses? Firebug, Skipfish, Ether8. This is all new to me, but Jeff prepared the questions.
Every now and then, IT security professionals should actually take a look at their toolboxes. Open up the toolboxes, try to understand and try to look at, what tools are there that are available to help them combat all these new exploits, this new defense, and of course also to automate our job so that we can work less and slack more. And as threats change, your tools have to be updated, all right? So that there must come a time where you need to replace your old favorites with the new hotness. And some of the open source tools that you can have fun with is, of course, Firebug, Skipfish, Ether8. But apart from that, you have Pogo, in case you forget a password. Metasploit, awesome tool, right? OpenVest, W3AF, Selenium, Wireshark, and of course Burp. In fact, Burp seems like such a simple tool, but in our organization, we do a web application penetration test using just Burp. Right? It's such a powerful tool, and that is free, so that's pretty cool.
All right. We also have been hearing that victims of targeted attacks that originate from so-called advanced persistent threat, or APT attackers, have been under siege for so long by the time they discover it that forensics investigators can't even trace the original machine that was infected. So how serious and how common are these threats?
Well, Frida, APT is real and serious, although a lot of the hyped up APT cases are actually not really APT, right, as we discussed earlier, because it's become a convenient scapegoat. But if you are under an APT attack, then be careful with the information that you disclose. You don't want to hastily share your information or your malware sample with your antivirus vendor, because the moment you do that and a signature is released by your antivirus vendor, the attackers, the bad guys, quickly reinvent the attack. That just makes the whole situation even more complicated, right? So what you need to do is do not share any information with your firewall vendor or antivirus vendor until your investigation is complete. And from our experience in the last year or so, the biggest shift in terms of APT attack is actually in the industries that are being targeted. we noticed that, of course, what security firms are aware of are only 2% of these attacks. 98% of them go under the radar. But from the 2%, 42% of them were commercial companies and 58 were government or government related. So we see a trend now. Now, APT is being used for not just government organizations, but commercial firms as well.
Okay. And you were saying that you have the CSI workshop. That's, I guess they can find out from your website?
Yes, they can, or just give us a call, 9236-7297, or drop me an email.
Okay.
That's Krishna at AKATI.com.
AKATI. Any final tips?
Well, finally, let me just repeat the 4-step rule again. That's first, know your threats, do an assessment, right? Number 2, guide yourself, so know your current security posture, right? Know what your threats are, what is allowed and doable. And then number 3 is to implement mitigation strategy, protect yourself, right? And number 4, repeat this process. And of course, the last one is to focus on education. That makes it 5, isn't it? So I got to start learning how to count.
Yeah. And I guess when you were saying even with security posture and all that, it is it's actually physical people that you need to be aware of.
Yes, both.
Yeah.
Physical, IT, as well as your data, your information. So it's a sort of a comprehensive security posture that you need to look at.
All right. Krishna Rajagopal from AKATI Consulting. This is Tech Talk BFM 89.9.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. To find more great interviews, go to bfm.my or find us on iTunes. BFM 89.9, the business station.